I woke up like any other morning. The sun, a pale, indifferent smudge behind the suburban haze, barely found its way through my window. My house, a modest ranch-style box with peeling paint and a perpetually thirsty lawn, felt exactly as it always did. A little too quiet, a little too neat for a man living alone. That's John for you, I guess. John Miller. 47, divorced, works a data entry job that lets my brain shut off for 8 hours a day. I've always been the kind of guy who just exists, blends in, part of the background hum of the neighborhood. I made coffee, black and bitter, the same way I always did. The morning paper, mostly junk mail and headlines about local zoning disputes, lay on the kitchen counter. I flipped through it, thought about the lawn that definitely needed mowing this weekend. Another weekend, another chore. Not much to look forward to, not much to dread. Just routine. Then, the world ripped. It was a crack, a thunderous roar that shook the very foundations of the house. A blinding flash of white light, an ozone smell, and then the sound of splintering wood, like a giant hand tearing through something old and powerful. The old oak tree in my front yard, the one that had stood there since before this subdivision was even a dream in a developer's eye, had caught a lightning strike. Dead center. I dropped my coffee mug. The ceramic shattered against the tiled floor, sending dark liquid splashing across my bare feet. My head hit the linoleum with a dull thud. For a second, everything went black. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was strange. My old baseball cap. The one I swore I'd misplaced years ago, the one with the faded beer logo that probably belonged in a dumpster. It was sitting on my bedside table, right where my alarm clock usually was. But it wasn't just there. It was clean. Too clean. Like it had just come out of a dry cleaner's bag, not from the dusty, cobwebbed depths of my garage. I rubbed my temples. A dull ache throbbed where my head had met the floor. Absent-minded, I guess, I mumbled to myself, a dry, almost self-pitying chuckle escaping my lips. Or maybe I did some cleaning yesterday and just forgot. Could have been my ex-wife Brenda, though we hadn't spoken in months and she certainly wouldn't have left it so neatly. I picked the cap up, the fabric soft, almost new. A subtle unease brushed against me, faint like a spider's web in the dark. Still, I thought, nothing special, just one of those things. I pushed myself up, shaking off the lingering daze. The house hummed with a different kind of quiet now, a post-storm hush. Lights flickered, a faint smell of burnt wood lingered in the air from the oak tree. I needed to check the circuit breaker, probably. And the tree, God, the tree. I shuffled into the living room, grabbing the remote to turn on the TV. Maybe the local news would have something about the storm. I needed normal. Anything normal. The screen flickered to life, showing a weatherman pointing at a Doppler radar, predicting more rain for the evening. Typical. Then, the channel changed. By itself. The weatherman vanished, replaced by a grainy, static-filled image. It was an old documentary, I think, maybe from the 70s. Black and white, mostly. It showed crumbling temples, ancient symbols carved into stone, then transitioned to faded illustrations of celestial maps and monstrous figures. Old prophecies, I guessed, about the end of the world. It should have had a booming narrator, some dramatic music, but there was nothing, no sound at all. Just those images, flickering. And a low, persistent hum started in my head. Not in my ears, not outside. It was inside, a sound that vibrated deep behind my eyes, a noise without origin, like a tiny engine running deep in my brain. I flinched. What the hell is this? I pressed the channel button. The weatherman was back.
Must be interference from the lightning, I reasoned aloud, but a cold shiver ran down my spine, independent of any draft in the room. I shook my head, trying to dislodge the hum, which was still there, a strange, unwelcome guest. Getting old, I guess, I mumbled. I went to set the remote back on the coffee table. My fingers brushed against the plastic. There was a tiny crack, almost invisible, running along the plastic casing. A fresh line that I was absolutely certain hadn't been there before. I traced it with my thumbnail. It wasn't a scratch, it was a fracture.
I stared at it, then at my hand, then at the TV, a growing knot forming in my stomach. The humming in my head softened a little, leaving only a low, throbbing aftertaste. Nothing too special, I tried to tell myself again, but the words felt hollow now. I felt a strange urge, a flicker of something in my mind. The remote. I held it in my hand, staring at it. And for a moment, I tried to will it somewhere else. Just a fleeting thought, a silly impulse. It vanished. Just like that. No noise, no flash, no nothing. One moment it was in my hand, the next my hand was empty. My breath hitched. My heart started to race, a frantic drum against my ribs. I stared at my open palm, then at the empty space where the remote had been. Then, across the room, near the dusty old armchair in the corner, it reappeared, lying neatly on the floor. Identical. I dropped the grocery bag I'd been holding, its contents scattering. A can of dubious beans, a box of stale crackers, a bottle of cheap soda. They tumbled onto the floor with a pathetic clatter. My eyes darted from my empty hands to the remote, then back to my hands. A cold, icy pressure pressed against my skin, like an invisible hand had just clamped onto my arm, then vanished, leaving only the biting cold. It lingered, a spectral touch, long after the physical event had passed. "No, no way," I croaked, my voice dry and rough. I tried to make it happen again, to force the feeling, but nothing. Just the silence of the room. I picked up the scattered groceries, my hands trembling slightly. Just my imagination. Or maybe I'm just too tired. Yeah, that's it. Too stressed out. I forced a weak, unconvincing laugh, barely audible even to myself. But the icy coldness on my skin persisted, a ghost touch that wouldn't let go. I went to the sink, ran the water, tried to wash it off, but it felt like the coldness had seeped deeper, into my bones. But the grocery bag incident, that wasn't imagination. That remote, it had gone, and then it had come back. This was real. The ability. It was real. And with that realization, the hum in my head, the one that had been lurking, subtly, now surged. It wasn't just a sound. It was a compulsion, a deep, gnawing instinct, a cold dread that clawed at my insides, a stark, undeniable message. It's coming. Everything is ending. You need to prepare. I stood in the kitchen, still holding the can of beans. I wasn't hungry, but a deep, persistent echo in my very bones, an alien voice whispering through my nervous system, told me to keep this safe. Somewhere safe. My hands started to tremble, an uncontrollable tremor that intensified with the urgency in my mind. I held out the can, just like I had with the remote, and it simply vanished. A small, silent snap in the air, barely a whisper. I felt a strange, hollow emptiness in my stomach, like a piece of me had gone with it, but also a peculiar sense of completion, a flicker of something like relief. "It's real," I whispered, cold sweat beading on my forehead.
trickling down my spine. God, it's real. My kitchen, my boring, familiar kitchen, suddenly felt alien, like a stage prop in a play I didn't know I was in. I saw a bottle of water on the table, and without even thinking, my hand reached for it. It moved, I noticed, a split second slower than the thought that formed in my head. Another snap. The kitchen seemed to dim slightly, the colors leaching out, becoming duller, as if my perception itself had been changed. I couldn't stop. A packet of stale cookies, gone. An old clunky flashlight from the junk drawer, gone. A worn-out pair of gardening gloves, gone. Each time, that soft snap, that hollow feeling, that strange, comforting echo of completion. And each time, a subtle tremor ran through my body, a new, deepening connection to this place I was sending things to. Mild panics started to bubble up, along with a queasy feeling in my stomach after each use. But the urge, the primal command to hoard, was stronger than any physical discomfort, stronger than any reason. After a few more minutes of this, collecting, I guess you could call it, I felt another wave of something. Curiosity, maybe, despite the creeping dread. I decided to try to retrieve something. The old pocket knife, I recalled. I thought about it, picturing the knife, and extended my hand. My fingers clenched around nothing. Then, a peculiar sensation. A coldness, a dampness. My hand was there, back, but it felt different.
The skin was strangely smooth, too smooth, and a faint, musty smell clung to it, like old earth. I rubbed my hand against my jeans, trying to get rid of the feeling, but it persisted. I tried again, focusing on the pocket knife. Another snap, and it was back in my hand. The knife, which had been dry and metallic, now had a thin, cold film on its blade. I wiped it, but the film felt like it was from the metal itself, not just clinging to the surface. I brought the knife closer to my nose. The metallic tang was now mixed with that distinct, damp earth smell, and something else, like rusted iron and stale air. I shivered. "This isn't just an empty box," I mumbled, my voice barely a whisper. "It's somewhere, and it has a something." I looked at the knife, then at my hand, feeling a deep, peculiar connection to that inexplicable dampness. I needed answers, or at least some kind of anchor. My brain, despite the growing sense of unreality, desperately craved logic. I went back to the computer, my fingers still faintly damp, my mind buzzing with an electric, almost frantic energy. I typed in psychic abilities, teleportation, sensory distortions, anything, everything. I scrolled through forums, crackpot theories, scientific explanations that didn't fit. I clicked on a video titled Ancient Doomsday Mysteries, The Cosmic Shift. A man with a too enthusiastic smile and a slightly unkempt beard appeared on screen. He began to speak, his voice tinny from my cheap laptop speakers. "We are not alone in this universe, and we are not," he said. Then the video glitched. It skipped back, only a fraction of a second, but it was noticeable. "We are not alone in this universe, and we are not." The words repeated, but this time the man's smile seemed a little more twisted. A subtle static rippled across his face, a visual tremor. I tried to rewind, to get a clearer look. As I dragged the slider back, the man's face on the screen grew noticeably paler, his eyes appearing more hollow, sunken. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was as if the video itself was degrading.
I clicked pause. The screen froze, showing the man's distorted, ghostly face. Then I saw it. My own reflection. Reflected in the dark screen, superimposed over the man's spectral image. I blinked. My reflection blinked, but it was just a microsecond slower. A fraction of a beat. Just enough to send a cold spike of dread through me. I let out a small, dry sound, barely a gasp. But even that sound, it only echoed in my ears a beat later, as if my own voice was now out of sync with my body. I was breaking. Something was breaking. And it wasn't just me. I decided to sort through the meager items I'd already stored away. The can of beans, the bottle of water, the flashlight, and a single AA battery I'd found in a drawer. I thought about the battery, extended my hand. Snap, it was back. I looked at it. Its surface, once smooth and metallic, now had a thin, faint layer of green-gray moss. Like something that had been buried in the earth for a century, not just pulled from an invisible pocket a few minutes ago. I rubbed it with my thumb. The moss wiped away easily enough. But then, as I watched, it started to grow back. Slowly, subtly, but undeniably. A thin, greenish-gray fuzz began to creep across the metallic surface again. I stared at it, a new kind of terror gripping me. Moss. I tried to think the word. Moss. But it didn't form right in my head. There was a weird blockage, a strange emptiness where the word moss should have been. I knew what it was. I could picture it, describe its texture, its color. That green-gray stuff that grows on old rocks. But the word itself, it was gone. Like it had been deleted from my mind. I glanced at the small potted plant on my windowsill, a resilient little fern my ex-wife had left behind. Its leaves, normally a vibrant, ordinary green, seemed to shimmer. For a brief, terrifying moment, they shifted. They turned a pale, sickly gray, as if the very concept of green was simply dissipating around me. Like the colors were draining from the world itself. I knew, deep down, this wasn't just about a battery, or a forgotten word. This was about something far, far worse. This was about the erosion of meaning, of reality. This was the true nature of what was happening. This was the beginning of the end, and it was starting with my own mind.